Please sit down. You are the most beautiful women in the room, but you fail to understand this is not a night off for us. Take a look around. This is not some game. You get noticed, and that gets us noticed. And us being noticed gets us all shot.
What is your mission?
Operation Anthropoid.
What is Anthropoid?
We are here to assassinate Reinhard Heydrich.
He's executed thousands.
Only Hitler is above him in the Nazi hierarchy.
Are you completely mad? You kill Heydrich and Hitler will tear Prague apart.
The question we have to ask ourselves is this. Is our country ready and willing to resist Nazi Germany?
Gentlemen, this operation will involve almost everyone we have left in the resistance.
Armed escort. 30 seconds behind.
30 seconds, 30 seconds.
If you're arrested, there will be no escape. Carry the cyanide capsules at all times. May God be with you.
Maybe it was a mistake not to inform you of the danger.
She's very young, still has romantic ideas about the war.
And you?
War is not romantic.
There's a problem.
What could we know?
It is your duty to stay alive and continue fighting.
If we fail, I fear freedom will be wiped from the map.
So obviously I planned ahead to match the movie poster, so please give me some kudos for that. Thank you.
It's good.
I want to start with you first, Sean, because this is such an incredible story. I grew up in Germany, and I thought I knew pretty much, not all there is to know about World War II, but a large part of it. I had no idea. Like, how did you learn about this aspect of history?
I saw a documentary in 2001, and I was like you. I hadn't heard the story, and I was, wow, this is amazing. And it felt like a movie for me when I saw it. And I started to research it, and I slowly uncovered a massive amount of historical artifacts of this story, and from there sort of decided, I thought this has got to be a film, and it's very well known in the Czech Republic, but not many people outside of the Czech Republic know about the story.
How did you go about researching it?
I did a lot of pilgrim trips there to the church, the real church, and the museum, and we got involved with the Ministry of Defence, and they've got a lot of the original clothing that the men wore, and it's because the Gestapo were actually going to open a museum, to sort of dedicate the facts that they'd found these assassins of Heydrich, and they were going to make a museum. So they had a massive amount of document collected, and obviously when the war ended, that all went to the Ministry of Defence in the Czechoslovakia at the time.
And for those of you who don't know, this is a plot to assassinate Hitler's number 3, right? And he was, I mean, Hitler himself called him the man with the iron heart because he was the butcher of Prague. He was ruthless. He was relentless. He seemed to be unkillable. How did you guys come to be a part of this?
I got sent the script by my agent. I had never heard the story before. I think my Second World War history in general isn't probably up to scratch, but I certainly didn't know about this specific piece of it. And I was just sort of blown away by the story. I was already a massive fan of Sean's. I'd just seen Metro Manila like 3 weeks before, and I'd said to my wife, like, I'd do anything to work with this guy, and then weirdly the script arrived a few weeks later. And Cillian was already attached at the time, and that was appealing.
It's a huge bonus for Jamie, I think.
Well, Cillian, what about this spoke to you?
It was this, very similar reaction to Jamie's. Yeah, I read the script and it was so compelling, and the fact that it actually happened. And again, I wasn't familiar with the actual story, but I think as actors you get attracted to stories that are kind of. It's a David and Goliath kind of story, and then when you make a film like this, you have a big sense of responsibility because these guys actually existed, they lived and died, and their families are still in Prague, and they all came to see the film when it premiered in Prague. So you feel you feel the kind of weight of history when you make a film like this, but then it has to be in the hands of a filmmaker that can carry it off. And like Jamie, I'd seen Metro Manila, Sean's film before this, and I was absolutely knocked out by it. And so I just wanted to be involved.
And when you say that you have a sense of responsibility, I can imagine it's a pretty massive sense of responsibility. How do you fulfill that?
I mean, you do your best. Obviously, you do your due diligence and you do all the research that you can. But ultimately, the script becomes the document that you have to rely on, and we're not making a documentary. We're making a piece of, a film, a piece of fiction, and so you have license, and but the responsibility. Just every time, I suppose when we shot like in the actual sites in Prague, and it kind of it weighs heavily on you. Obviously, you can't carry it around all the time because you're making a piece of entertainment, but it does weigh heavily.
And did you guys meet with the families before shooting?
Not before, no. They sort of found me afterwards, actually, after they'd seen the film. I've actually just only really met them. But a lot of my research was taken from interviews of the survivors of the certain events that had happened. And especially through the sort of 70s, there was a time when there was a lot of journalistic reporting going on because there was I think there was a lot of guilt as well after the war, and so the story kind of got hidden a little bit because there's that question, is assassination the right thing to do, and I think a lot of people just didn't, especially the fact that after the war, Czechoslovakia was sort of handed over to the Russians, and the Russians sort of, they were controlling. They didn't want to sort of make that story. They didn't want to get behind that story. They kind of wanted to squash that story because it was kind of a little bit against their sort of regime at the time, the sort of what was going on. So it was only in the sort of 70s and 80s where it started to really come out again.
Do you guys think that it was worth it? I mean, the backlash was immense.
Yeah, I mean, that question is posed from quite an early stage. I first read the script, I thought about that a lot, but I think if Heydrich had stuck around and he hadn't been killed, I think what he had planned for Czechoslovakia at the time would have been far worse than the reprisals that took place as a result of it.
But don't you think it happened anyway?
Sorry?
I mean, he came up with the final solution, right?
Yeah, that was his. Yeah, that was his. He was the mastermind of the final solution. So, I mean, for us, I always say this, that to go to work every day and be, try to inhabit a character who his mission is to kill someone who was that sort of heinous and that evil, was all the sort of motivation you needed every day to go to work, I feel.
How did you guys approach playing these characters, given that there are real-life figures, there's a lot of historical documentation of what happened?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, you do as much research as possible and you amass as much of the information as you can, but then ultimately you kind of have to leave that behind and you concentrate on the script and you concentrate on the sort of energy that you can make on set. And, it was very, very tight, the three of us together. We worked very, very closely. And, Sean wrote, produced, directed, and shot the movie. You know what I mean? It's quite an achievement. And it really felt like the three of us in there all the time. And you're aware of this as background, obviously, that these people existed and lived and died for it and how heroic they are. But ultimately, you have to make the best film possible. And it is a piece of entertainment. And it's not fact. You know what I mean? A lot of these things happen, but we're doing our version of these characters with all respect possible, but you have to kind of let it fly a little bit as an actor.
I don't know. I read about the assassination, and you guys seem to have nailed it. I mean, sorry, that's probably a bad word to use, but it's the way you filmed it. From the, it's interesting. I saw the movie, and then I was like, that can't really have happened, you know. And then you read about it, and you're like, holy shit, that didn't just happen. That
You just swore on
died.
your live, by the way.
I know it's okay. We can swear.
Oh, you can?
Oh yeah,
They
let
told
it
me
rip.
not to swear back there because it was live, and I thought I'm going to say fuck
Oh
the
no,
minute
no,
I
we're
come
not
out.
gonna we're not gonna kick you off. It's okay. Jamie, you can go. Go.
I'm actually really uncomfortable with swearing, so I'd like appreciate an apology from you, actually. If you don't
I'm
mind.
really sorry.
He fucking
really
hates
so-
swearing.
I mean, that
I'm
is
really sorry for
fucking
using
red.
offensive
Fucking
foul
found the level
language.
already, haven't we?
We fucked it up totally.
Fucking hell.
Fuck. Jamie, do I need to give you $1 for a swear jar or something?
I think more than $1. Like, that's,
You guys seem to be so tight. Did you guys know each other before
fucking
you
hate
started?
them.
no. To be honest, when we heard that we had to like get together to do press in New York this week, I was like, "Fuck, how am I going to get out of this?" Hang out with those two again. No, we really are all very close, and that is massively beneficial when you're making a movie like this. And it felt like a complete necessity that we had this bond with each other. And as Cillian said, we were very much like a unit, and every morning started with, you know, a real sort of gathering of us and trying to like work out how to best approach the day and make it work for all of us. And I think that's kind of rare. I don't think you get that in every job. I feel like you don't always get that with director. They don't give you that time, or don't let the actor be as involved as, you know, the actor feels that they should be. So it's refreshing when it works out like that, yeah.
And what about you, Cillian?
I mean,
You hate
yeah.
this guy, right? I mean, I heard you say backstage, like you're like, Jesus Christ.
I know. I can't stand him. That's why he's as far away as he can. No, genuinely, it was. You look out. What you know, you hope every job you make, you hope you're going to get on with the people. You hope you're going to connect with people. But genuinely, it was a joy every day. We really just, like, it was a very intense shoot. It was very, very fast. You know, Sean was shooting the movie and directing us, so he felt just always so close to us. It was the first time I've ever had that. Have a director as a DP as well, and it was, you know, because there can be a distance where the director's sitting behind monitors quite far away, but we really felt like we were in it together, and we shot it, you know, very, very fast and quite guerrilla, and it was very exhilarating to shoot.
Did you guys at least go out at night after you're done working?
Yep.
Dude, and that's all he says.
It was kind of funny. I remember this one, I think, well, there was one night that I actually don't remember, but there was another night that I remembered, and I remember we went to dinner one night, and we walked over Charles Bridge, which is one of the most busiest bridges in Prague, and there is literally thousands of tourists taking pictures of the bridge and everything. And I remember you walking across the bridge, and there wasn't. Nobody even like batted an eyelid at him. No one took a picture or nothing. No one even was looking at him. And I was like, I was kind of mad. I just walked across Charles Bridge, which is like walking down Oxford Street with Jamie, with hundreds of cameras, and nobody sort of had clocked him. And then we got in the restaurant, and then the waiter was like, "Oh, can I have your photo? Can I have your photo?"
Jamie, are you able to kind of navigate sets and not be recognized when you're working, or is it always like, oh my God, it's Jamie?
I think I'm recognized on set. Is that what you said?
You know what I mean? Like people walking by.
Like the crew and stuff? Yeah. Like, yeah, no.
You know what I mean?
I don't know if I do know what you mean, but I'll try to answer. Yes, that's my answer. Yeah, no, look, I mean, you know, there's no, like, I don't think that I'm anybody, but certainly in a crew environment, no one gives a shit who you are for the most part, unless you're one of those people who puts it out there that, like, you know, don't, you know, I should be treated. I mean, Cillian's a bit like that, but he's a bit like unapproachable or whatever. But
that's what I heard. Yeah.
I'm pretty.
Don't look me in the eye, please.
So, Cillian, for you, what was the most? For both of you, actually for this for all three of you, what was the most challenging aspect of filming this?
That should be you.
You're like, where do I begin?
Yeah, most challenging. I think it was just trying to keep all the balls in the air in a weird way. You know, it's such an intense period. It's 40 days, and it's, you know, it's a marathon in that respect. And you have very little sleep. And as you know, Cillian was saying, I was holding the camera as well. And I just remember my focus puller at the beginning saying, because we shot on Super 16, which is kind of a small film format. And she said, oh, you know, the camera weighs like 16 kilograms. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds okay. And then I just remember at the end of 40 days, it felt like I was carrying a car or something. And I was just like, you know. So I think it was a very hot summer. And I remember just, you know, it being, I remember we were in the studio and they didn't have air conditioning. And it was so hot that the rubber was melting off the wiring of the lighting. And we had to shut down production and get these air conditioning units in from Germany. And even these air conditioning units had to be sprinkled with water to keep them cool, because it was incredibly, you know. And I remember that first day in the church, and we just ground to a halt. It was like, and we were looking at the rushes the next day, and everybody was bright red. And I was like, well, we can't use that footage. So.
What about for you guys as actors?
I mean, I guess the biggest challenge was something we touched on earlier before, and Cillian was saying, you know, we're playing real characters, and you know, as much as we are bending parts of the truth here and there to make it a better film-going experience, we're still very aware that this, you know, happened, and these people lost their lives to this in this horrific way, and you do feel a bit of an obligation to be respectful to it and honor it in the right way. So I guess you carried that with you every day, and that was a challenge. But yeah, I mean, actually, I'll jump on what Sean's saying as well, like the heat. We were in Prague in the height of summer, July, August, and much of the movie's set in the turn of the year, you know, January, February, and we're running around in like three-piece wool suits and big wool overcoats. And like, I'm not saying like people, there's way harder ways to make a living, but it was pretty brutal.
I remember. Do you remember the beginning of the film? We had this beginning where it's set in snow, and of course we were shooting in August, so we basically covered an area of about 500 square meters of fake snow, and it was 40 degrees, and all the crew were just in shorts and t-shirts, and these guys are like running around in this paper snow with all these coats and sweating, and yeah, that was kind of bizarre.
How much powder did you guys go through? Face powder.
I can't speak for those two, but I was pretty clean, to be honest with you.
Now you are in Dunkirk, and footage was just released. What was production on that like? No, I mean, you've worked. I actually want to know about Christopher Nolan, because you've worked with him quite a bit.
Yeah, we're still shooting. It's been a great experience, you know, and I mean, absolutely coincidentally, it's another Second World War story, you know. But it's just an amazing story, and you know, he's obviously an exceptional director, and I'm very lucky to have worked with him a few times and thoroughly enjoying this one. Yeah.
And Jamie, you're in.
I turned down Dunkirk, just to put that out there. I turned it down.
You're in
whole movie.
You're in a pretty big franchise.
Every part of the movie.
You're in a pretty big franchise. Outside of this, how do you choose your roles?
I think you've just got to sort of follow your heart, and you know, I think it's good to mix it up. I don't, with all the greatest respect to action stars and stuff, I just couldn't do the same shit every day. Like, I couldn't just be kung fuing guys in the face every day. I just like to, you know, find a different challenge every time, but you know, mix it up. Like I think there's a little bit of a onus that I put on myself if you've got like a big franchise, like I do, you feel like you want to do a couple of things that are outside of the studio system, do some smaller stuff. I personally get a lot more enjoyment out of shooting movies that don't have very big budgets, because I believe that everybody works harder, and they just graft more, and you have to make it work, and you can't be lazy, and you can't rely on the studio helping you out if you go over budget, or you know, all that stuff that protection you have when you're doing a studio movie. I find it far more interesting when you're up against it a bit.
And now looking back on this experience, what did each of you take away from it?
Well, it was very humbling, you know, to make this film, to shoot it in Prague, to shoot it with a Czech crew, to have, you know, Czech actors in the movie who are all amazing, and I just hope that we've done justice to the story and that we made a compelling piece of cinema, you know, and I really think Sean has to take credit for that, because it is, you know, I've seen the movie, it's very exhilarating. That's probably not the right word, but like certainly it kind of transports you, you know, and then to actually think that these people did these things, that these people were that heroic and that brave and that selfless, is quite kind of humbling, you know. So I hope we did justice to those.
It is really, like, when you think about these two guys took down, I mean, regardless of what followed and the repercussions, they took down someone who was deemed untouchable. And
you know, it changed the course of the Second World War, you know, it really did.
I mean, it definitely changed the view of them as a country and where they stood. You know, because after that, Churchill made the Munich Agreement null and void and counted Czechoslovakia as an ally. And I think that was, you know, for two men to actually turn that opinion around and bring the country onto the right side of the war. Because unfortunately, it was the Allies that gave Czechoslovakia away in the first place to avoid war. And so they were in this really difficult situation where they were sort of given away and then sort of disregarded and sort of deal with it, you know, and they were slowly being, you know, they were annexed by the Germans, and then they were sort of on their own, really. So I think it's an important part of history to be told and put right as well, because I think, you know, we had a big, as Cillian said, we had a big responsibility for that.
And last question before we go to the audience. If each of you could meet one historical figure and just pick their brain, who would it be?
What? I missed the end of it.
If you could meet any historical figure and pick their brain, not their nose, their brain, who would it be?
I meant to say someone really like sort of highbrow and earnest, but I'm going to say Elvis. Don't say anybody clever.
Richard Burton.
Yeah.
With that. What about you?
Oh God, I don't know. I'd like to have a chat with Orson Welles. He'd be interesting to chat to. I should say somebody really.
Such actory answers.
Yes. Make for a really good dinner party. I'll say that.
Yeah, I would.
And by the way, did you guys coordinate your footwear?
He called me earlier and said, "What you're wearing?"
I'll be honest. Like since Sean worked with me, he's like really. It's kind of creepy. He started to really trying to like dress like me and stuff. And I mean, this is.
He's gonna rent me his body later because I'm gonna.
This is getting out of control. I mean, this is. I actually feel embarrassed for him.
Yeah.
I won't tell them the real story then.
And now for our audience, please.
Great. We're going to start with a question from an online viewer. So Kendra would like to know, for everyone, what was the most emotional scene to film?
Well, I think inevitably, you know, the end of the movie was very, very emotional for both me and Jamie. I mean, because, you know, what these characters had to go through, and they felt like there was kind of no escape. And also, you know, when you ask the question, was it worth it? Imagine having to live with that question. These characters had to live with that question because, you know, for a time it was a failure. They had failed in their eyes, and they had brought, you know, the wrath of, you know, the Nazis onto their country, and so I think, certainly for my character, trying to figure out how to deal with that guilt, or, you know, sense of guilt, and how to process that, and then inevitably, obviously, the end. So that whole last third of the film was profoundly kind of emotional to shoot and to kind of sort of comprehend.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd also say that there's a couple of scenes that Jan and Josef have together. Cillian and I we shot two of them in the same day, where, like, you know, he's having a breakdown and then I'm having a breakdown, and because of the way the three of us sort of worked together, there's a lot of energy and emotion going into sort of every moment, we felt like. But that day, I remember feeling sort of very like bereft at the end of the day, that, you know, having, you know, given so much to these like scenes that, you know, it's when you put yourself, it's so hard to comprehend what was the pressure of this situation, and to remind yourself that these guys were just, they're not superheroes, they're just like lads who are you know fairly unremarkable people put in a totally remarkable situation, and that's all I'm gonna say.
And what about you, Sean?
Probably the same as what Cillian said, because I remember we'd shot Jamie out of the church, and obviously his character dies, and that was very moving and emotional, and then because we'd shot the end towards the end, and then I remember we were in the crypt together, and it took a long time for the water to fill up, and over a number of days it would get higher, and we, all of Jamie's scenes in the crypt were without water, and then you were done and you went.
I left.
And it was really weird because we'd shot him and he was dead, and then he'd left, and it was me and Cillian in the crypt, and we were like literally the last men, and we were about to film his death scene, and it was the end of the film, and it was, I don't know, I think it was really emotional, and it felt very real, and it was like, it really felt close to the real story, and it was heartbreaking in a weird way, you know.
Next question, please.
Hey guys, congratulations on the movie. My question is for Sean. I wanted to know how much say you had in casting, and if you did have a say in casting, how did you know that Cillian and Jamie were the right actors for their roles?
They were forced on me. I just had to deal with it. No, I think first when you're casting two, because it's like I always saw it as a two-hander, but obviously the relationship between the two, it had to be, you had to believe it. It had to be something that you really it was really earned. So Cillian was you know, is somebody that I've known all my life of watching movies. He seems to have, and I'm older than him as well. So I was like, he's always sort of been an actor that I've looked at. So he was somebody that I just thought could play Joseph, and once I met with him, and there was that, you know, that click, and we were like, yes, we found Joseph. Then you start to find the other part of the jigsaw puzzle, and you say, okay, because it's going to limit you in a weird way, because you got to balance the casting, and then I met with Jamie, and we had a very good meeting, and I'd watched The Fall. And I remember we'd met, and there's such a darkness in Jamie in The Fall, and I was saying we've in a weird way, Cillian's character is the darkness, and Jamie is the life, and he's the one that is, you know, almost a puppy to this other character, and he's the one that wants to live and doesn't really want to go through it. He's the conscience of the audience. So once Cillian was in place, then Jamie it felt like the exact right part, the right jigsaw piece, and then we were off.
And last question, please.
Hi, thank you for being here. I was wondering, did any of you receive any advice that stuck with you to help you prepare for a World War II film?
Well, I mean, there's such an amount of resources out there for an actor, you know, nowadays you can research everything, and I think that is your duty to do that. But again, you know, I always, with every role, I try to do as much research as possible to have it all available, and once you've done that, kind of leave it behind, because you have to focus on the truth of the character, and you have to make the character as believable as possible. And again, you know, we weren't making a documentary, we were making a piece of film. So there's a huge amount of resources, and we did a great amount of reading, and being in Prague, shooting in Prague was hugely helpful, and being with the Czech crew, all of those things were, because you're in the world. Every time you go to work, you drive by, you know, the place where the assassination actually happened. You know, we spent time in the church, you know, so all of those things made it feel very, very authentic and real. And I think, again, that's a tribute to Sean. The film has such an authentic credibility to it. So I don't know if that answers the question.
And do you guys have anything to add?
Was it advice? Is that what you said? Yeah, I had some advice from a school teacher when I was at school, and they said he only does well when he's interested in the subject. And that was kind of, I've sort of really, that's the sort of advice I sort of take going into any project I do now. If I'm not interested in it, I never really do my best. So I have to be really passionate about it. And I was just very passionate about this story, and so I gave it my best.
And what about you, Jamie? You want to round it out? Best advice?
Best advice. When I was young, a school teacher said to me that no, I think I'm done.
And
is that what the teacher said?
They said you're done. They said you're the finished article. We can't teach you anything else. And they just set me on my way into the world and said you'll be fine.
Go forth and make good movies.
Prosper. Yeah.
And when does this open?
August 12th.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. Everyone see this movie.